record. There it is.
We are recording now. So we are officially recording. And yes, I see that somebody asked if we're recording. Yes, this is recorded and it's going to be shared with whoever won't be able to see the presentation. So they'll be able to see it later.
Great. Thanks, Ricardo. So for those who may have joined in the last 60 seconds, my name is Kim Lucas. I am the Assistant Director for DOMI with Planning, Policy, and Permitting. And I'm here tonight to kind of set the framework for the projects that you're going to learn about and to talk about how they fit into our department's broader goals. So the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure is one of the city's newest departments. We're about 3.5 years old. And our goal is to provide the physical mobility necessary for residents of Pittsburgh to achieve the social mobility that they deserve. We have 5 goals that drive us towards that mission. The first of which is safety. We believe that no one should die or be seriously injured while traveling our streets, regardless of if they're choosing to walk, to drive a car, to bike, or to take public transit. We think it's a fundamental right that you should be able to take your mode of choice and to do it safely. Our second goal has to do with accessibility. We want to make sure that residents have access to the things that they need, such as fresh fruits and vegetables. We want every resident within the city of Pittsburgh to be able to get to fresh fruits and vegetables within 20 minutes travel time of their home. Even if they're taking public transit, that 20 minutes should include their waiting time for that mode of transportation. We know that we can't do this by ourselves. This involves land use and other types of policy decisions. And so we work closely with other departments, such as the Department of City Planning, where Phil works, who has joined us tonight. Thank you, Phil, to work towards that goal. Our third is that all trips less than 1 mile are able to be achieved without a car. A lot of folks don't own a car, but a lot of trips are taken within the city by automobile. I think 40% of our trips that are shorter than 2 miles in length are being driven right now. When folks drive, you know, that increases congestion, that increases air pollution, it increases demand for parking spaces. And so we want to make sure that there are attractive options, especially for folks who maybe don't have access to an automobile. Our fourth goal has to do with affordability. We believe that no household should spend more than 45% of their income, regardless of what their income level is, on the combination of housing, transportation, and energy. We know that we can't control housing costs or energy costs, but what we can do is make sure that we're providing affordable transportation options to all of the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. And finally, City of Pittsburgh is full of residents that have great pride for their city and consider themselves diverse and inclusive. And we want to make sure that our streets reflect those values. Next slide. So our Bike Plus plan, of which these projects were identified, is the first bike master plan that the city of Pittsburgh has had in 20 years. So we finalized and released this plan in, I believe, June of this year, after years of development, hundreds and thousands of public inputs, and a number of open houses to get the final public engagement completed on our draft. This plan identifies 120 miles of improved bike connections throughout the city, but what it doesn't do is identify what those 120 miles will become. It simply identifies the network gaps that were identified through our public engagement process over the last couple of years. In addition to those 120 miles of on-street connections, it also identifies almost 30 miles of new trail connections and the policies that are needed to support those on-street and trail network improvements. So policies that make it easier to securely park your bike in places, that make it easier to make the connection between a bike trip and a public transit trip, and many more to make sure that we're thinking in robust ways about the biking opportunities in our city. Next slide. So this is a picture of where we started in terms of bike facilities, where we are today. As you can see, we have a nice diversity of facilities, shared use paths, which are trails, protected bike lanes, all the way through to some neighborways, which are our non-bike facility dedicated roads, but there's streets that we think are good for biking because they are low speeds and low volumes, and we've done a few things to make them even safer. Next slide. And this is where we want to go. So as I mentioned, this plan that we finalized in June identifies 120 new miles of connections. So each of these lines will translate into a project like those that you're hearing about tonight. And again, it doesn't necessarily say what type of project it'll become, simply that a bike connection is identified for that area. Next slide. So bike facility types. How do we get from the design, from the line on the map rather, to design? So on the top left is an example of our platinum standard. It is a shared use path, or otherwise known as a trail, that is comfortable for cyclists of all ages and abilities. Completely separated from automobiles. These are also probably the most costly to construct, and they're the most challenging to construct because it's hard in a city that's been around for as long as ours has to find space to build something like this. That doesn't mean we're not doing it. It just means that it takes some creative thinking to find those opportunities. As you move through to the right and then to the bottom, you will see other standard facilities that we already have examples of and that many of those lines will become. Protected bike lanes, you'll hear a little bit about that tonight, or buffered bike lanes, the difference being a painted protection versus a physical protection, all the way down to neighborways. The first couple projects that you may have heard about this year that we've been implementing are neighborways, where there's no dedicated bike facility, but instead we use different tools from our toolkit, such as mini traffic circles or pedestrian bump outs to make the street safer for all of our users, and especially cyclists. Next slide. And again, our Bike Plus plan was the first one that the city of Pittsburgh has had in 20 years. It was in development for over 5 years. And as I mentioned, right before we finalized it in June and right before COVID kind of shut down our ability to have in-person meetings, we held 8 open houses citywide so that we gave another opportunity for folks to take a look at those lines on that map and those policies to make sure that we were putting down what they wanted to see. Next slide. And Move Forward PGH. I'm hoping that a number of you tonight have already seen billboards or perhaps social media ads that advertise Move Forward PGH. What that is it is the implementation of that Bike Plus plan. And it's a collaboration. As you can see, it is a City of Pittsburgh program. I am with the City of Pittsburgh, as are most of the folks that are on the call tonight. But we work very closely with a couple of our local partners, Bike Pittsburgh and Healthy Ride, the local bike share, so that we can expand our reach far and wide. Please check out moveforwardpgh.org for more information about this project tonight and to keep abreast of all the projects that are currently in the pipeline. Thanks, Ricardo. No, that was good slide transition time, don't worry. And then briefly, the project process. So planning is the first step to any process. And what that really means is that's when we get ideas from communities, that's when needs are identified, and that's when we start to think about what the possibilities for the future are. We've already started with that planning. That's what the Bike Plus plan was. That's what different neighborhood plans like what the Department of City Planning has produced has. That is something that we're still kind of a part of now as we're working with you guys, the community, to get more information. We're using this step right now, this public outreach, this public meeting tonight, and our stakeholder meetings that you'll learn more about to get to design. We're coming to you with some ideas of what we think might work, but we know that there's a lot of trade-offs that have to take place. When you're in a dense urban environment where most of the space is already spoken for, any sort of improvement or change generally requires making some trade-offs. And so we're going to talk a little more about some of the trade-offs that we've already proactively identified for some of our projects and how we hope to engage the stakeholders that would be most affected to make sure that the trade-offs are the right ones. And finally, when we are successful and we've gotten the feedback and we've been able to make the best design that will work for the space, we will hopefully move to construction. And we'll talk a little more about construction timelines tonight with the individual projects, but just know that they're contingent on us being able to finalize design and making sure that we get all of our public engagement in that we are desiring. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to pass it on, I believe, to Paige Anderson, who will give you an overview of the East Liberty Boulevard bike lane upgrades.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I recognize a lot of the names on here. Good to see you. We talked about the Bike Plus plan quite a bit, but I wanted to go into a little bit more into this area and specifically. You'll see that a lot of these bike lanes, some of these already exist, and those are the ones in this baby blue color. So you'll see the Negley Avenue bike lanes as well. These Negley Run, we're going to talk about the upgrades later today, but those bike lanes do already exist. Last year, these Broad Street bike lanes, the road diet went in that created those bike lanes. But there's some other ones on here that you may not recognize. Euclid Avenue, that's a neighborway that we are working towards right now. If you have been over there, you'll see that there's the pilot is up for those traffic circles. And as Kim said earlier, those are ways that we can create bike connections without relying on designated bike lanes. So that's a good example of that. And there's another neighborway on this map that we are installing this summer, and that is the Bloomfield Friendship Neighborway, which you'll see coming in on Coral and connecting to Negley over here. There's also some URA planned projects on Station Square and Penn Ave. So you'll see that, you know, this East Liberty Boulevard, these existing bike lanes that were installed in 2008 with the road diet that created them, has really become the backbone of the bike network in the East End. So we, yeah, that's something that we heard a lot at these Bike Plus plan meetings. And, but we did hear that they did not feel, as safe as they could. And there's a few reasons for that. But so we wanted to explore ways that we can improve them and increase this connectivity, making it safer for bikes and pedestrians in the area to use that main corridor to get to their destinations. Next slide, please. So yeah, going in more into that route selection, it is pretty much the primary east-west connection on the Bike Plus plan. I can't speak for everyone here, but I live in the Friendship neighborhood, and when I have to get over to, you know, to Trader Joe's, I use the East Liberty bike lane, even though it's not nearly the most direct route, because it is the safest and the best option for me when I'm on my bike. And that's something that we heard echoed throughout the Bike Plus plan process. So we really want to upgrade it to all ages and abilities if we can, which is a national standard of comfort that allows for, you know, newer cyclists and less experienced cyclists to still have that connection available to them should they desire it. So it connects a lot of things, including the Obama Academy, which is part of the reason for the all ages and abilities precedent. And then it also connects a lot of business districts and parks, and as well as neighborhoods. Yeah. Next slide, please. So right now we've gotten a lot of feedback that these existing bike lanes that were again installed in 2008 do not feel safe. And part of that is because they're floating bike lanes, which means that they have the parking, and then which is about 9 feet wide, and then there's the bike lane, and then there's that you know, fast moving traffic going. The speed limit is 35 miles per hour. We are collecting data to confirm to see how bad the speeding problem is. We do know typically people do tend to travel at least 35 miles per hour, and also you see when people are traveling at those speeds, if you're out at the corridor and watching it, how many people are drifting in and out of that floating bike lane. And I think part of that is because it is a little bit poorly defined in the way that it is floating in there. Some people use it as a turning lane. Some people use it to pass people, to pass the buses. And it's just overall creates a connection that's valuable for a lot of cyclists, but certainly not classified as all ages and abilities. And some cyclists who are not very confident definitely do not feel safe using that facility as a connection. And as a result, you'll see a lot of cyclists on the sidewalks or forced to other areas. Which is too bad because that facility does exist. So what we are hoping to do is in the areas where there is a lot of underutilized parking, we will be able to move the bike lane to the curb and then create a buffer space between the high volume, high speed traffic and the cyclists. And I'll go into that a little bit more in detail. So we're currently collecting data that'll help us to inform our decisions. including historical data. We've also used PennDOT crash data, and we've seen that right now we usually look at the past 5 years, and in East Liberty there have been 83 crashes in that time. So that's on East Liberty Boulevard. So that's you know, pretty high, especially considering that most of those crashes are you know, could be lethal or very dangerous given the high speeds, especially for cyclists and pedestrians. And so we really want to do the best we can to help and slow down cars and make the corridor safer for everybody, including other motor vehicles. And then finally, we also are going to, of course, we rely on you all and your local expertise in this public feedback to help, you know, inform these designs and make them more, you know, make them actually work for everybody in the area and improve the circumstances and the conditions. I think there's so yeah, this is going again, showing all these connections. I think there's the next slide is the one that I'm looking for. There we are. So I'll go a little bit more into what we're proposing. And again, this is a 10% proposal, or this is very like initial proposal, just to get the conversation started about what we think could work in this corridor. We of course are looking for feedback, and we already have started to incorporate some of that feedback. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So right now, the bike lanes run all the way from Negley Ave all the way to Broad Street. Negley Ave is a unprotected, unbuffered bike lane. So for, and like we said, we have that Euclid connection. So we really want to prioritize making the all ages and abilities connecting to that Euclid connection. So for that reason, we are not going to be making changes between Euclid Ave and Negley Ave. We're going to maintain the high demand parking area there and instead really rely on that neighbor way to create that connection for, you know, all ages and abilities. That means that the upgrade that we are proposing runs between Euclid Ave and Broad Street and yeah, on Broad Street down there. And then past Broad Street to Penn, those facilities, you'll see there are some sharrows there, but we will be making the sharrows more robust and doing some other things to help encourage motorists to acknowledge that this is a shared space with cyclists and make cyclists feel safer in their connections as they use those facilities to connect to the rest of the East End. So that connects to that little cycle track on Penn in the Baker Square area and Mellon Park, and some valuable connections that way. So while we won't be able to, we are not proposing adding bike lanes there, we will be improving the conditions. So along that main corridor where we're talking about creating a buffered bike lane, we are proposing that we would be removing parking to move that bike lane to the curb line and then put this 5-foot buffer that again puts some space between this high volume, high speed vehicles and the cyclists. We have heard feedback that, you know, there are religious institutions and other stakeholders along the route who are concerned about this, and we want to work with them to try and either find alternatives or find some kind of compromise that can work for everyone. Again, this is our initial proposal and the beginning processes of that. It'll also include some intersection improvements, and one of those intersection improvements is these bike boxes. You may have seen these sprung up around the city. They are becoming more popular, and a lot of cyclists are beginning to understand how to use them. And what they do is they allow, encourage cyclists to, rather than having to merge through many lanes of traffic to make left turns and get to left turn lanes, which is feels very dangerous for them. It helps them to navigate the intersection by creating opportunities to take a 2-stage left, which when there's a signalized intersection, it means that you would travel to the right and then wait at the next intersection to cross that road. And these turn boxes help to make that clear. There are, you know, many of them throughout the city, and they are becoming a little bit more standard. So we want to encourage that by installing them at the intersection with the Negley Run Boulevard bike facilities. With that, I'm going to pass this on along to Sean, who's going to talk about, you know, this is a separate project, even though they obviously work very closely together. So he's going to be talking about the Negley Run Boulevard bike lanes.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Sean Stevens, project engineer with DOMI and the Traffic Bureau. And as Paige said, we're going to talk about Negley Run Boulevard bike lane upgrades. It is a separate project from East Liberty, but the two do build upon the same network and intersect. And so the bulk of the upgrades will be along Negley Run between East Liberty Boulevard and Washington Boulevard. And before we dive into the details, I want to first give a little bit of background and context to Negley Run as a whole. So the valley where the roadway is today lived up to its name and actually had a flowing tributary stream that was part of Negley Run watershed. This was at least up until sewer lines were installed between or in the early 1900s. The area at one time had many homes and even a factory along its hillsides and valley floor. And the picture shown here is construction of the Meadow Street Bridge, which was built across Negley Run in 1910 to connect Larimer to Highland Park. Honestly, this view is absolutely unrecognizable from today. There was a point where I even tried to recreate this photo to show today's conditions, but there were just too many trees blocking the view. And so just to give you a little bit of background, next slide or click, please. Thank you. And then in the 1950s, homes in the valley were demolished and the roadway was upgraded to the traditional boulevard style that we see and use today. The intent was to connect suburban commuters with to East Liberty and the other East End neighborhoods. And for so many decades, there were two travel lanes in each direction, as shown here in this screenshot. And those existed up until the installation of bike facilities in 2014. Next slide, please. Thank you. Today, the boulevard has one vehicle lane in each direction with buffered bike lanes as well. However, there is currently a lack of protection, which does leave cyclists exposed to dangerous and some high-speed traffic. There have been 64 crashes on this route in the past 5 years, according to PennDOT data, several of which have been attributed to aggressive driving and one in which included a cyclist. Next slide, please. So the upgrade we are proposing is adding a two-way cycle track on the outbound side of the roadway. So that's the downhill lane of the road going from East Liberty to Washington Boulevard. In order to provide full protection and reduce annual routine maintenance along the corridor, a cycle track was chosen as the best alternative. The outbound side was chosen to limit any conflict points at the awkward intersection and slip lane at Collins Street and Negley Run. And further, placing the cycle track on the outbound side neatly fits in and connects to the now under construction Washington Boulevard Trail, otherwise known as the Cattail Trail. That project is in coordination with PennDOT and DOMI and is planning on providing a shared use path to connect Negley Run Boulevard to the Bud Harris cycling oval and parts of Highland Park, and that'll run parallel to Washington Boulevard, obviously separate from the roadway. That project includes some signal upgrades and crosswalk improvements at the intersection of Washington Boulevard and Negley Run, and is slated to be complete this autumn, actually. Next slide, please. So the rendering here on the left shows the proposed typical cross-section of the roadway. So picture it if you're at the bottom of the hill, standing at the bottom of the hill looking up. This is the view that you would see with this proposed layout. The cycle track would provide 5-foot bike lanes in each direction with a 3-foot protected buffer between the vehicle travel lane and the bike lanes itself. To protect it and update these facilities to the all ages and abilities standard, we're planning on including alternating bollards or flex posts, as well as rubber curb stops parallel to the direction of travel. And it's a very similar style of protection that you can see downtown along Penn Avenue cycle track. And the photo on the right just depicts that treatment and shows you what that actually looks like in real life. The vehicle travel lanes would remain exactly as the same as today, with one in each direction. Next slide, please. And then the turn lanes at the intersections with Washington and East Liberty Boulevards would also remain the exact same as today. There are parking spaces between Collins and East Liberty along Negley Run that would remain as well. Those will not be removed. And then, as previously mentioned, we're also proposing a number of bike boxes to facilitate those two stage lefts. So bicyclists can enter and exit the cycle track at Negley Run and East Liberty Boulevard. And so that's an overview of our proposal for Negley Run. A quick shout out to the Living Waters of Larimer for the well-documented history of Negley Run Boulevard and the Negley Run watershed as a whole. And thanks to the Pittsburgh City Archives for some of the photos that I shared as well. Next slide.
Thanks, Sean. So I wanted to pop in here and go over our project timelines, both for East Liberty Boulevard and for Negley Run. Give me 1 second here, I'm having a delay. All right, so we have done initial outreach to key stakeholders near for the project. So we made early efforts to get feedback from community stakeholders, both for East Liberty and Negley Run. East Liberty obviously has more attention, and we want to be able to give it that, and Negley Run's a little more straightforward. So part of what we did was reach out to the neighborhood planners for the community. Phil Wu, who is with us today going over the questions, and Chris Corbett, excuse me. They got us in contact with the leaders of the East Liberty Chamber of Commerce and the Larimer Consensus Group. So these organizations have really been helping us to reach out and access faith-based organizations in the area, and also at the schools, so the Obama Academy. So last week, Paige and I had, Paige, our engineer, held an informal meeting with the leaders of Larimer Consensus Group, the Chamber of Commerce, and luckily we were able to get to have a conversation and include the Rodman Street Mission Baptist Church to walk through the East Liberty and Negley Run projects. We did focus more on East Liberty, and we were looking for options about what's happening on the project, what we can do to maintain parking in that area. And we really want to continue, even though we're in this very first step, these deep dive conversations with faith-based organizations and other key stakeholders to figure out successful solutions. So we'll be doing this now, of course, and then avidly throughout the process. So this has been step one in the project timeline. We're now having our very first public meeting. So this is introducing both of the projects. I will say again that East Liberty is kind of earlier on in the planning process. That's why we are reaching out. Negley Run is more a little bit more in the design process. And so following that, we will be having follow-up stakeholder meetings. That's what we want to hear from you, the community. We want to connect with those key stakeholders. We are interested in really following through and making sure that we are continuing our outreach. And then we'll have a second public meeting around mid-August, and then we'll have more concise designs that will be reflecting the community input. And then by, I guess we don't have a continued date, but the installation of both bike lane upgrades will be the final construction process. Oh, and I'm breathing up. I'm so sorry because I'm understanding. Sorry, I hope people were able to hear me.
It wasn't so bad. I think I could understand you. I hope.
Okay, I'll put headsets in.
And then just a little bit about the public or the project funding for these two projects and the planning, design, and construction. So the Bike Plus plan was paid for with the city capital budget. And then the Move Forward program outreach, which are with our partners of Healthy Ride and Bike Pittsburgh, that was through grant funding. And then we also have internal outreach team within the city, which is obviously paid for through the city operating budget. The planners, Cassandra, Philip, and Kim, operate. They're paid for through the city operating budget as city employees, and then design with some of our work with consultants was paid for through grant funding, and then the ultimate construction is paid for through the city capital budget, and was a line item for 2020. Next slide. So I think with that, that is our overview of these two projects. We definitely want to hear some of your questions, get your feedback. Remember to fill out the survey form as well. Does anybody want to add anything else before we dive into questions?
Oh, sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add that we realize that there are almost 160 of you that are participating in tonight's call, and we obviously won't have time to address all of your questions. So what Phil's going to help us do is he's going to go through and look for common themes from the most frequently asked questions. Again, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, if you want a response from the city. And then we will follow up with all registrants to this meeting with an email. We will go and we will create a frequently asked questions document that will be posted on our moveforwardpgh.org website, and we will also share those responses with you directly. So if your question does not get answered right now, rest assured that we will receive it. We will review the transcript from tonight's meeting, and we will respond in writing via follow-up email to everybody tonight. Well, not tonight. You won't get the email tonight, but to everybody who participated tonight, you will receive an email.
Yeah, people have been asking also about obtaining the presentation and also the recording, and those will be shared as well. So just so you know.
And then I shared in the chat, since I was breaking up, I apologize, just notes of what I said from the timeline. If anyone had any questions, I'm happy to follow up on that.
And we have, or we will have a survey, I believe, so that if you can give us your feedback that way as well, especially now that you've learned a little more about the project, that's another way that we're taking sort of a temperature check of the neighborhood and making sure that we're getting feedback from everybody who has questions or concerns or any sort of feedback for us.
All right, I will dive into some of the questions that have been asked. First one from Melissa, is this plan already finalized?
You said, is this plan finalized? Is that what you said?
Yes, is it already finalized?
No, this is very early in, we've made like the starting designs. This is early on in the process. So, I mean, we've made these recommendations. We are doing, I mean, Paige, maybe you can answer better than I can, but we're very early on in this process. So we are nowhere even near the construction phase. We're not even near the full design phase yet, which is why we're doing the outreach that we're doing. So we couldn't even show detailed designs because we don't have them.
Yeah, that's correct. It's very early in the design phases. I would say Negley Run is a little bit further along based on our initial outreach, but both of these designs the scopes are, a little bit more finalized. We have goals with the project and those are going to be the same, but in terms of actual designs, nowhere near finalized.
All right, second question from Melissa. How did you solicit engagement from the community? How did you ensure that those engaged in diverse voices?
I can speak at least to the early outreach, and like we said, we are continuing outreach. This is very early on, and we want more engagement. Like I said, I reached out to neighborhood planners initially so I could make sure that I was gathering stakeholders that were really representative of the community. We spoke to the East Liberty Chamber of Commerce and the Larimer Consensus Group. And I mean, we also had some conversations with the Obama Academy to really get a pulse on what was happening to these stakeholders, but we reached out to leaders of those organizations to then share content that we initially talked with them, to really share links, to make sure that we would have it present at this meeting. This is the very first introduction of this. So this group right now, we're hoping to, continue to spread the word. We wanted to really have anchor institutions that would continue to talk about projects. I'm still working avidly to try to get more organizations, apartment complexes in the area, healthcare services in the area. I think we're trying to reach out to Kingsley Association to really have people who are key anchors to say, who do we need to be listening to?
And Cassandra, unfortunately, you are breaking up a bit, but just to reemphasize, she was saying that this is the first major public meeting. We've got 150 or 60 people participating. We send out project flyers to addresses that are affected for a lot of our meetings. We've met with the council member office multiple times to identify other community organizations that make a lot of sense. And in some of our projects, you know, we do different approaches depending on the project type. But in some of our projects, if you go out to Euclid and take a look at the Neighbor Way pilot, you'll see that we actually have signage up so that if you are somebody who uses that roadway, you will find out information about it and you will find out ways to engage with the city. So we're really trying to use all types of approaches to get people who would be impacted directly because they live there or they're using that roadway, all the way to making sure that the elected representatives that represent that community are briefed on the project and give us ideas of who we should be reaching out to as well.
All right. Let's see here. Jane asks, while I live in Pin Hills, I attend church at Rodman Street Church. Construction of the bike lanes will not permit us to park near or around the church. How will this be addressed?
And I think that, I don't know if I'm breaking up still.
I can take it, Cassandra.
Okay.
So sorry, Phil, you're also a little quiet too. Yay, technology, yay, COVID and not being able to meet in person. I apologize. Well, I don't apologize. I didn't cause COVID, but I wish that this was a slightly easier experience for everybody. But the question had to do with parking and specifically at faith-based institutions. So we were really aware going into this that that would probably be the #1 concern that we heard about the East Liberty project of the two that was presented tonight. So what we're doing is we've already started reaching out to those institutions individually. We have learned of another organization that has representation from all of those institutions. Was it Village of Faith, Cassandra, that we learned about tonight that we're going to reach out to? We hope
Village Collaborative, I believe.
Village Collaborative.
Yep.
We hope to identify solutions based on the specific needs of those organizations. So finding out exactly what day of the week, what time of the day that peak parking is anticipated, and find out if there's other opportunities. We know there's a number of surface parking lots in the area, and we're hoping that through a collaboration between those properties and churches that, or I'm sorry, faith-based institutions, predominantly churches, I think, in this corridor, that we would be able to work out some agreements. We are very early in the design. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different constraints. So, you know, if we had all the money in the world, we could probably move some curb lines and take out some of that planted median and build a trail, you know, maybe, but we don't have all the money in the world. And so we're really trying to find a bridge between all the different stakeholders within the community and budget and design considerations. And we hope through that one-on-one engagement that we're continuing to pursue that we'll get more information to help make those decisions.
All right. H. Carter asks, is the existing Negley Run Boulevard bike lane, does it connect to Center Avenue?
I can take that one. So the Negley Run bike lanes they do right now connect to Center Avenue, but with the cycle track, if you're coming uphill, you'll need to make a right and then like a 2-stage turn. So you have to make a right and then a left. If I had a layout, it'd be a lot easier to explain this, but we're trying to have appropriate signage and directional arrows for cyclists so they know which way to go to continue their journey if it is along Center Avenue.
Armin asks, what is a super sharrow versus a regular sharrow?
I can take that one. So a super sharo is a sharo that has a, well, it could mean a lot of things, but in this case, what we're proposing is a green MMA, the bright green reflective paint backing the sharo. So they'll be not only more visible, but also more resilient towards like weather and maintenance.
Zoot asks, why a two-way cycle track on Negley Run Boulevard rather than two separate bike lanes?
I'll take that. There's a couple reasons at play here. So really the most important reason is that we can provide adequate protection as a cycle track on just one side of the street and really reduce routine maintenance along the corridor because that is somewhat lacking, and we know that, and we're trying to make it easier for our folks at the Department of Public Works to maintain these bike facilities, and so that is a factor at play. And further, if we were to have two bike lanes on either side of the roadway, there's one very large conflict zone with that intersection at Collins Street, which just has a huge swath of pavement that is an accident waiting to happen, to be honest. And so we're trying to eliminate conflicts, and hence the cycle track on the outbound side going downhill.
Anonymous asks, how does DOMI prevent drivers late at night mowing down the candles that separate the bike lane and the traffic way?
What we could do to prevent that, because technically it is wide enough, if a cycle track is 10 feet wide, hypothetically a car could drive down there and enter. But we could put a flex post or another type of vertical element at the beginning and end of the cycle track to prevent people from entering, at least for the Negley Run portion of the.
And I think if the question was about, I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, Phil, but if it was about just preventing the drivers from hitting the flex post to begin with, there's visibility standards for those flex posts that involve reflective materials so that when you have your lights on at night, you can see those flex posts. And remind me, Sean, you said there's rubber curb, or is there concrete curb that we're also using?
Yeah, rubber curbs, and those also have a reflective element on them as well.
So we make sure that they're visible both in the daytime and at night.
Correct, yeah.
Let's see here. Abe asks, with Negley Run, is there anything built into the design to help mitigate stormwater runoff?
With this project, no, there is no elimination of impervious surfaces. We're using the existing curb-to-curb width and just restriping the road to install these facilities.
Lori from the East Liberty Chamber of Commerce says businesses in the neighborhood are very concerned about traffic patterns and people avoiding the East Liberty Business District because of traffic issues. Will any auto lanes be eliminated? And would you consider utilizing secondary streets versus main streets where traffic is already difficult and where bikers face less danger?
I can take this one. So yeah, I think that's a great point, and that is kind of the idea around the neighborways. When we can, we like to try to find alternative routes. Unfortunately, Pittsburgh is not a typical city. There's not a lot of redundant routes. And this East Liberty existing bike lanes have become a pretty major connection for that east-west connection. I do think that, sorry, I blinked a little bit. So we're asking about, can you repeat the first part of that question, Philip?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
the question was just about whether or not there would be a reduction in travel lane.
Oh, right. Yeah, we are at this point. We are not. Thank you, Kim. We are not planning on changing any the amount of travel lanes or the same with turn lanes. We are not planning on removing any of the turn lanes. There was the 2008 project that created the bike lanes, was a reduction in travel lanes, and we are planning on maintaining all of those travel lanes that exist on East Liberty Boulevard and Negley Run.
Carl asks, will DPW be able to routinely sweep or vac the Negley Run cycle track since there's often sand and gravel on the sides of Negley Run due to drainage?
I'll take this. Yes, they can. I believe their street sweeper is 8 feet wide. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's 8 feet. And so they do have enough width to be able to maintain the cycle track as we have it laid out right now.
Yeah, I think that in relation to the cycle track, the existing equipment would actually be able to clean it versus us having to procure new equipment. So it actually benefits us that it is a two-way cycle track for maintenance.
Raynell asks, there's a robust population of older members of the faith-based institutions. Parking is incredibly limited now during the larger services.
Mm-hmm.
If this project moves forward, would the design allow the restriction to be lifted on the days, predominantly Sunday, to allow parking on those days?
Mm-hmm.
Many members are not able to walk from parking too far away from their venues.
I know that we are actively working with faith-based organizations to learn more about when their days of service are. Obviously, Sunday is a big day. And then I believe we talked to the Robin Street Church that Wednesdays are also very popular, but we want to do deeper dives with other congregations just to make sure we're being thorough. And I believe we are checking with several solutions. We want to make sure that if it's difficult for pedestrians to access the church or to reach or walk very far, we want to secure like that kind of parking. But I believe we're making an effort to look at the surrounding area to see what the existing kind of parking is, both private and public. We are looking just for the opportunities to how we can prioritize the parking for those specific residents who would have the higher need and need the proximity. But this is a continued conversation, and it's just the beginning. So that's why we need more input from the churches, from the community, so that population is not left behind and also highlighted. Kim, do you want to talk anything else about what we're working on for that kind of focus?
Mostly that we are very aware that that is a concern. And so by individually engaging with those organizations and also with the group organization that brings a lot of them together and has representation from them, we hope to figure out exactly when and where those needs are so that we can think about creative solutions, whether that is a design solution, whether that's working towards a collaboration with some of those surface parking lots in the area. That's why we're here to talk tonight and going forward is to figure out exactly what's needed to figure out what the
right. It is completely community engaged. It is a lot of what we're doing with our designs. We want to hear what the community needs.
Anonymous asks, how many parking spaces will be removed altogether, and how many of these are close to the Rodman Church?
And I think Paige, that might be, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. So we're talking about East Liberty Boulevard as a whole. So I can speak to, I'm not sure which church that is, but looking at a lot of them, again, we're trying to discuss and find solutions. I cannot speak to the exact number of parking spaces at this time. I do know, I've counted a few blocks, but if you look at the existing street, we're talking, we can try to calculate some of those more exact numbers to be ready for following meetings.
Yeah.
Jameson mentions that bike lanes on Negley Avenue, East Liberty Boulevard, Negley Run, along with others in the city, are currently faded out and in need of routine painting. What's the plan to make sure we're maintaining current infrastructure before adding new projects?
I can talk to this a little bit. So at this point, we maintain paint based on the paving schedule. But I will say on East Liberty, I know the reason that the paint is wearing away so quickly is because of how many motor vehicles we have running over those lines. I do think that they will be more easily maintained themselves on Negley Run when we put that vertical elements in. And similarly on East Liberty Boulevard, when we create that extra space, it will allow for the paint to be more sustainable because it will be put in areas that will get less traffic. So that will help us. And, I don't think at this point we have any plans to change our maintenance schedules, but we do try to keep, maintain paint, redo paint as best we can as needed.
Audrey mentions that there's housing along East Liberty Boulevard, along with the churches. And she asked if residents are also included in this project.
Sorry, Phil, you're breaking up for me.
Oh, okay. The last part was, are residents also included in the outreach for this project?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one, obviously with this public meeting, two, with what we're trying to reach out to with the faith-based organizers, obviously you don't have to be part of the existing congregation, but this is also why we're talking to the neighborhood associations, to the schools, why we'll be having a second meeting. We really want this to be something that the whole community is aware of. It's give feedback on. So absolutely, if you are renting or own a home on this project, you're impacted and your opinion matters. So this is the first steps to reaching out to residents, and we will be talking to other nonprofits and other, through the neighborhood planners of the area, to really say, how can we better reach residents? So, like Kim said, also we will be emailing all the registrants of this event. So we encourage everyone to share the second public meeting link. So the more people to know, the better, but we will be actively reaching out to reach residents because they are as important as businesses and the faith-based organizations.
All right, Abe asks, are there plans for ADA compliant crossings over the grassy median at streets such as Sheridan, North Beatty, North St. Clair? Mentions that many people cross here and will continue to cross regardless of no pedestrian signs.
I can take this. So at this point in time, we are not proposing any changes to the curbs. Creating those crossings would require quite a bit of concrete work that at this point we have not incorporated into the budget. But like we said earlier, this is, a very flexible process, and we have heard some of these concerns have come up, and we would be willing to consider them, of course. So, if that is something that we may find some flexibility in once we figure out if we can afford it, quite frankly. But yeah, we can certainly look into that. But at this point, I think that all of the crosswalks are already high visibility piano keys, but if they aren't, we certainly will be upgrading them as part of this this process as we try to upgrade them throughout the city whenever possible.
Don asks, are there long-term efforts to connect beyond the Bud Harris Oval to the Highland Park Bridge?
I can take this one. Actually, there is a very long-term goal to connect the Washington Boulevard Trail to a rail trail that is the Allegheny Green River Boulevard. That is the hope to create a shared use path the whole way from the Strip District at, I don't remember the cross street, pardon me, I think it's 14th Street, but the whole way from 14th Street in the Strip District all the way up to Highland Park Bridge. It's a very ambitious project and is, again, a long-term goal. And so we're actually chipping away at it, though, slowly with this Washington Boulevard stretch, and then the rail banking project in the Strip District to buy a portion of the CSX rail line, which I think Cassandra or Kim could speak a little bit more to as well.
Anonymous asks, what are the plans to better maintain the sidewalks for pedestrians along Negley Run Boulevard? Currently, the sidewalks are completely overgrown with weeds and overgrowth.
I think that's a great question, and it's a good reminder. So unfortunately, there are a lot of needs in our city, and we are actively pursuing them. So through our pedestrian safety action plan, which we hope to have finalized later this summer, we have identified ways to improve pedestrian safety through a number of different strategic actions. So that will touch on accessibility, it will touch on maintenance concerns and needs and opportunities. So while the scope of this project is focused primarily on that space from curb to curb, not necessarily beyond the curb, not necessarily the sidewalk. When there's questions that get raised like maintenance, that's something that we definitely can take back and take a look at. You know, in the city of Pittsburgh, the adjacent property owner is responsible for maintenance of the sidewalks. So we can take a look at how we can work together to make some improvements there. I do want to be cognizant of time. We are a little over. It is after 7 o'clock, and there are a lot of folks on here who are listening in. And I see we've already lost about a third of our participants. So if we can take maybe 1 or 2 more questions with the acknowledgement that we will screen all of the questions after the meeting, and we will respond via a follow-up email to any that we were not able to address right now. And we thank you for your time, and please take a look at our website and move forward pgh.org and fill out that survey. That's another opportunity to go through where we have specific questions that we would like your specific feedback on.
Great. And actually, if there is anything if you do survey feedback, if there are groups that we should be getting in contact with, if there's someone who, like some organization, some business that you feel really should be represented, please put it in the comments, because we'll be reaching out and we'll be going through all of the questions today and the chat so that we can really have active feedback and benefit from the size of this group, because the turnout for this is wonderful.
And did we want to ask a couple more questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Beverly asked, when will this plan be concluded, and will those affected by the bike lanes be contacted?
I can speak to this. So we, you know, we don't have concrete until we have designs. You know, we can't get the contractors on contract, so we don't know exactly when this will be done. We hope that we can do you know, both of these projects, but you know, even if it's just Negley Run, you know, we would love to do them, you know, before the construction season is over, which usually it ends somewhere around October is when it gets too cold for us to paint. But in the meantime, you know, those are still kind of up in the air. That is just our goal. And we want to make sure we can do the appropriate community outreach in the meantime and engage everyone to incorporate everyone's concerns into the designs before we could even schedule those construction dates. But once those construction dates do exist, absolutely everybody will be informed. You know, hopefully we will have informed them in advance because we'll be doing this engagement with them. But beyond that, before we do any changes to people's streets, including just repaving, we send out postcards to let them know that changes are coming to their street.
Yeah, there would be an introduction mailer and then a follow-up construction mailer. And oftentimes when we do have these projects, if necessary, we can also do posters. So there will be that kind of outreach.
And Regina asks, did you or will you talk to the school district about making these bike lanes? Many students are taken to school by their parents, and she doesn't see many of them riding bikes.
We have initially reached the Obama Academy, although there is obviously this time of year is very busy for them, and obviously changes with COVID, they're even more busy. So they were not available for this meeting. They'll be available, we were told, after the 31st, but we are also reaching out to a Pittsburgh public school representative to further, you know, to talk about what the options could be and how it would impact, you know, walkability, bikeability, what we can do to encourage engagement. We have also heard from, I believe it was the East Liberty Chamber of Commerce, like there is connections with arts classrooms and a bike program, and that we could really, you know, engage with students, even if remotely, talking about, you know, what the bike lane would mean. So really extensive interest is one to be put out for the schools because they are such a crucial stakeholder.
And one other thing I'll just comment on is I do believe looking at the design details, this does impact, you know, the parking in front of the Obama Academy on East Liberty Boulevard, but I don't believe it impacts any of the loading zones. That parking, I believe, we have been told, has been used primarily by teachers, so we are working with them to make sure that, you know, that we aren't creating any problems. But in terms of like loading zones, you know, we haven't heard, again, we're having these discussions with them more thoroughly in the future, but it is just the East Liberty portion of Obama Academy and not the Highland Park or the BAD sides that are being affected.
Right. Yeah. And we are not only, and I guess to clarify, you know, it's not just the teachers, but it's the students and their families. So by extension, when you're reaching those schools, you really are, we mean the entirety of the schools. You know, it's important that we are reaching out to the staff, but since students, you know, are engaging so much with every intersection, street, and their families, that is a crucial part that we want to pay attention to.
And just as one more quick plug, we, in that pedestrian safety action plan that I mentioned, one of the specific actions is to engage students and local youth in our capital project process. And this is one of those projects that would be really appropriate to do that. We also the city welcomed this year our first Safe Routes to School coordinator, Harriet Jackson. And that is a brand new position and a brand new program for the city of Pittsburgh. And her job is to coordinate with schools and to make sure that kids have an opportunity to get to and from safely, biking and walking, for their health, for the health of the community, and for accessibility. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we have more resources than ever before with regards to strategic educational institution engagement, which is a mouthful.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you all for being part of this meeting. Again, we'll send you an email with not only the presentation, but also the recording of this meeting, and we'll give you a follow-up, and we'll answer your questions, all the questions that we were not able to answer tonight. So yeah, thank you team as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everybody for showing up.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, guys.